A very good evening and welcome. This is Biz1st in Focus. I'm Ramesh Irugal Bandara. Our guest this evening is a very special one, all the way from the United States of America. He is known as a social media guru. He earlier served as the Chief Digital Officer of New York City, of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Columbia University, and was once named the most influential Chief Digital Officer of 2016. Good evening and welcome to the show, Sri Srinivasan.
Delighted to be here. My first time in Sri Lanka. It's been an amazing few days and I love being here.
Okay, now I want to get to your experiences in Sri Lanka, but before that, is it right to say that you gained international fame after being laid off?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's true. I loved the job I had at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, one of the biggest art museums in the world, and I was brought in and told I'm leaving. And nothing prepares you for that. I was so shocked. And this is one of my lessons for everybody who's watching is, I don't think in Sri Lanka we have the hire and fire system the way they do in America. So maybe you're not used to it and maybe it'll never happen, but there is a chance that it could happen. And the day you're told to leave something, especially when you love something, if it's a job you hate, you lose it, who cares? But if it's a job you love, it can be really devastating. And that's what happened to me. And then I went on Facebook and I said, tell me what to do next. And 1,400 people filled in a form that I gave them, and they gave me some good ideas, some smart ideas, some terrible ideas, but they did want to be helpful. And so at a moment when I was at my worst was also where I felt the best, that people cared, that people want to help, and it had nothing to do with me. People want to be helpful, and these days there's so much bad news about social. I always remember the good news when I can.
So you're saying social media influenced your life in such a way that it brought about a revival in your professional life?
Absolutely. I think that's fair enough to say that I was able to use the tools of social media to use the network to get help for myself. And now I'm dedicated to using that network to helping other people as much as I can.
So how influential is social media in the world right now?
So social media has never been more important, more influential, and more reviled and more hated than it has ever been.
So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, people who have been following social media for many years in Sri Lanka and elsewhere will be surprised to imagine from the early days how much influence there is and also how much hate there is for the networks. There's also always been hate and problems on the networks, but the hate of the networks is pretty unusual.
Now, we spoke about hate of the network. I mean, the most recent incident that I can think of locally in Sri Lanka was we recently had incidents that transpired with regard to a bit of racial tensions happening. And the government stepped in and instituted a ban on Facebook and a couple of other social media platforms. And this led to a decrease, some say, in the incidents that transpired. Do you think that instituting such a move or restricting social media can reduce tensions of this nature or reduce bad information going out? Do you think instituting bans is the right thing to do?
Well, in this particular case, it worked, right? Because we were planning our trip to Sri Lanka and we were watching on the news how bad it had gotten, and we were worried, would we be able to even come? And we were able to be here because somehow, not because of just because the social media was cut, but there was also specific other measures taken by the government and other people. So I think that that's a good thing that they were able to stop it. It is not sustainable to just keep banning social media and hope things work. Those are the things that a lot of governments try in different countries, and often they're authoritarian and things like that. Because what happens is that companies use social media, individuals use social media. If you ban WhatsApp today, thousands and millions of people who use WhatsApp will suddenly not have a way to communicate or to share their information, good, useful information. So I don't think it's a long-term strategy, but occasionally we've seen it work. It would never work in a place like America because even that kind of internet kill switch that a lot of people look for doesn't really exist. The other part is that a lot of people also knew how to get around these, right? So just like China has the great firewall of China, we may have had the tiny, firewall of Sri Lanka for a few days, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and part of it is on the social networks. They need to fix the problems of their networks and how they're sharing information and what is being allowed to continue. I think one of the things I saw was that there was a call for more Facebook staff here, that in local staff, let's have that. And I believe the government would welcome them. So that's a good sign from the government. They didn't say we never want Facebook. They said the opposite. We want more Facebook to come and settle down. If I were advising Facebook, I'd say, please come. These people need you. They're willing to listen. Because there are a lot of places where people don't want Facebook and want to push them away. So we don't know the exact answer, but I think this is what Sri Lanka has done, is handle it in a really interesting and proactive way.
I want to talk about the data that is there on social media. We've heard a lot of reports about Cambridge Analytica. We'll get to that in a minute. But before that, I mean, locally, the data that is there within a country, do you think that data should be stored within the country itself? Do you think a country should be able to request these sort of companies to have this data pertaining to a country within that country, within servers inside the country, because of national security concerns?
You can see the case for that, but I would also say that as someone who worked for a government, I was the chief digital officer of New York City, which is a different kind of thing, but it was it's a big organization with millions of people who are our constituents. That we would say to companies all the time, we'll let you be a test bed in our city, but give us access to the data. Not give us all the data, don't share it with anybody, but give us access to it. And I think as a country, Sri Lanka is known for being open and accessible and friendly. And to suddenly say, well, you can only do this, you must store it here, you must store it there, it's a tough issue. I'll make a comparison to another part of my life at the museum. When I was at the museum, whenever Chinese visitors would come to the museum, they would look at our Chinese pieces and say, that was stolen, that was stolen, that was stolen, we don't like it. And then one day a group of Syrian journalists came and said, do you have any Syrian art? And I said, sure. And I would take them there and I said, oh no, now they're going to say stolen. You know what they said? They looked at all the Syrian art and they said, thank you. They said, because it's here, it's still safe. If it had been back home, it would have been destroyed, right? So it's a kind of stretch, but it's an analogy to say, we need the data, we should have it accessible, but storing it on local servers somewhere doesn't mean it's safe. It could be, people could come and target that and take it away. In today's world, the safest way to deal with data is to have it in as many places as possible, not as few places. Governments may not always agree.
Okay, we need to talk about data and social media further on, but before that we need to go in for a short commercial break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. This is Biz1st in Focus. With me tonight is social media guru Sri Srinivasan. Before the break, we were talking about data and social media. Now we saw Facebook institute a policy of splitting their news feeds, and this was implemented in about 5 countries, including Sri Lanka. Recently, about a month ago, they decided to revert back to the original system of having one news feed. Why do you think a small country like Sri Lanka, because we don't have that many Facebook users in comparison to other nations, why do you think a country like Sri Lanka was chosen to test this?
First of all, I hadn't even heard of the test till I came here, and that tells you something. That companies like Facebook are doing a lot of tests all the time, and I think Sri Lanka is a great place to test because it is a small population, relatively small, but it's also very diverse, very tech savvy. People, I don't know what the penetration is on phones, but it must be, high 80s, 90s, even more maybe. And people are, I think, open-minded, wanting to learn, are kind of hungry for knowledge. Sri Lanka, that way would, I think, be a good test bed. They say the social media capitals of the world are like Brazil and Indonesia. People love social media in those places, and India is very proud of its own use of social. But if I were testing in India, it's too big, it's too diverse in that sense. But you get, in a way, a lot of the benefits of testing in India, but in a relatively controlled environment. And you also, if you use Sri Lanka, you also have the expat community of not just expats here from other countries, but also the Sri Lankan expats all over the world, and they're a very volatile, or at least very vocal, or especially I see them only on the cricket side. When you see, they are very excitable when it comes to cricket, and I show the love of their countries like that.
We are the heart of the party when it comes to cricket match.
Yes, exactly.
Now, how important do you think is social media for businesses at this point of time? Because we see traditional businesses breaking away from their traditional advertising streams and switching to digital more and more. But you don't really see that growing at a fast rate here in Sri Lanka. How important is social media at this point of time for businesses?
Well, of course, it's clear they should all be advertising on your channel, right? That's the #1 thing they should be doing. But after that, what is the options? And I think social and digital platforms are one of the options, because people are tuning in less to the newspaper or the magazine in many parts of the world. In some parts of the world, like in India, they're still growing. The traditional media is still growing. It depends on where you go. Like, I was so excited at my hotel in Colombo, so many newspapers, and they're all vibrant, a lot of excitement on there, and that's great. That means you want to advertise there also.
Yeah.
But you're in other places, it may be less and less. And so I think that there is, what I call this kind of storm that came to the American media may not have come here yet, and that's why advertisers may be not advertising as much, looking for social and things like that. But that will change, because there is unfortunately this kind of big storm coming where digital will have to be a bigger option for companies.
Is the future on mobile?
It already is. I cannot emphasize how important it is to think about not just mobile first. Many things are mobile only now, and that means that imagine the audience watching here. What percentage of it is watching online versus watching on television, and then within online, are they watching it on the phone versus the computer, tablet versus that? And by the way, these phones keep getting bigger and bigger, so you don't even need a tablet anymore. But the opportunity for companies to focus on the digital part and the mobile part is very important. And I also talk a lot about how do you create content that is meant just for online, on phone use. The last few days I've been in India, multiple cities teaching, and here teaching, and I forgot to pack my main laptop cable, so I've been carrying essentially a very beautiful, very expensive paperweight in my bag. And when you go through the airport security, they make you put it out, and I kept doing that, and every time I look at it, I say, this is a waste, I should not have brought it. And I did all my work on my phone. And were there times when I would have preferred to have a nice laptop? Yes. But I was able to do it and do my work. So I think companies need to be thinking, how do I cater more to the people who only have phones? And that's an increasing portion of people. And I've turned into a guy who's only using the phone because I have this beautiful paperweight.
You spoke about content creation. Now, we see there are plenty of YouTubers out there in the world who create content exclusively for YouTube and make a living off YouTube, of the money that's generated from that. Do you think that something like that is viable for a country like Sri Lanka? Because our audience is not that great, and maybe sometimes the content that we create might not be as internationally appealing as content created by other YouTube users. Do you think for a country like Sri Lanka, YouTube content creation is a possible revenue stream?
This is a big question that not just on YouTube, but also Facebook is also trying to get influencers to create content there. They've been trying to incentivize it, Instagram, all of these things. I think that it certainly is possible, because there's nothing about Sri Lanka that isn't interesting and fascinating, and certainly parts of it you can think about, all the beautiful beaches and the environmental stories out of here, plus all the fun things that you can do. I just saw a clip of Sri Lanka's Got Talent, some karate guy who blacked himself out. Maybe your audience has seen it. If not, I don't know how you search for it.
It's been broadcast on
so they know it. So that's a perfect video which could have been done anywhere in the world, but I heard that some American rap stars shared it because it was a human moment, right? So it's not about whether it's from Sri Lanka or whether it's from London that it matters. It's what is the story, what is the content, and there certainly should be people. And Sri Lanka is famous for its food. There should, if there isn't a YouTube food star from Sri Lanka, there should be a YouTube food star, and that's an opportunity for somebody, because the food of Sri Lanka is so famous, and how they make it. And I could just watch, and then I'd get very hungry, but watch lots of videos of YouTube people showing us how to cook Sri Lankan food.
Now, there are plenty of businessmen and entrepreneurs that are tuned into this show. If I am going to start a tech startup company or any sort of startup company, what do you think is the first social media platform that I should be on?
It depends on the industry you're in. So
let's corner it to a tech startup company, maybe a mobile game development company.
Sure, which is, and I hope there are lots of them here, because there's nothing special about mobile game development that needs to be in the West. We have seen, Angry Birds was not born in California, right? It was born in Scandinavia. Even Skype was born in the Balkans, rather than. So there are all these tools. SoundCloud was not born. I think it's an exciting moment right now, as to say, where any good ideas can come from anywhere in the world. It has never happened like this before. It would take generations for things to trickle from the West to come to places like India and to Sri Lanka. But today, there's no reason somebody watching couldn't be creating the next great game here. So for them, what would be the platform? I would say that Twitter is really important, because that's where the VCs are, the venture capitalists are, that's where the sources of funding are, that's where the journalists are, typically. May or may not be exactly here, it depends. But then Facebook is also important. The install base, how do you avoid the fact that you have 2 billion people on there? And then I'm a big fan of WhatsApp. In a world where everyone's doing broadcasting, WhatsApp allows you to do targeted smaller groups. And if your cousin's really stupid jokes that can go viral, why not your app, right? So what does it mean? You're going to be successful not because of the platform you advertise on, but the quality of the product.
So the quality of the product outweighs the platform? Absolutely,
because if people love the product, you will find a way to find an audience. I'll give you an example. I taught entrepreneurship with a gentleman named Ken Lehrer in New York. He's one of the most successful VCs. And by the way, what I found how he works versus the way the VCs, I don't know any Sri Lankan VCs, but in India, so what he does is he does 50 plus bets a year, 57 bets a year. He bets, not millions of dollars, but $50,000, 20,000, like a game, like he bets on all of them, and then only wants 1 or 2 to succeed. The problem with Indian VCs is they want 1-to-1. Like if they put 1 lakh rupees, they want 1 lakh rupees to be successful on that, and that is not how. This is not. They don't understand this. I hope it's different in Sri Lanka, but it should be different and should be more like my friend Ken. And it's really about the quality of what you do. So he had invested in somebody in my class asked him, so what is your favorite investment in the last 6 months? And he said, we invested in something called GroupMe, which was at that time a conference calling device. One of these conference calling companies. And he had been bought just very recently by Microsoft for millions of dollars. And they asked him, but how will that ever make any money? And he said, that's not the question I ask. The revenue part is the least important in my book. The 3 things I look for: number 1, the team. I'm investing in the people rather than in anything else. 2, does the product work? I mean, does it actually work? As opposed to, I have a theory and I can do this, and we have this term, called MVP, which is minimal viable product. Minimal viable product. That means, does it work? Can I just, don't tell me how great it is, show me, right? Show, don't tell is what we say. And then the third is, does it have users who love the product so much they will tell everybody? And that's what they can do. Once it works, you go on, and then they put it on WhatsApp, or they put it on, and please play this with me, right? So like I have seen this happen. Out of Calcutta came, in the very early days of Facebook, there was a game called Scrabulous, which was a game for like a Scrabble word game. And it was the most successful game on Facebook for a long time. And it was started by 2 brothers in Calcutta. And so what I would say to anybody watching, and I do a lot of work with startups, just really focus on the product and making it work. Don't worry about the money, and all of that will come. But if you don't have a product, no amount of advertising, no amount of revenue, theoretical revenue is going to work. Just focus on that and really focus on the impact. And when I teach, we also talk about when you're building a digital product or an app, there are 3 words we like to use: simple, useful, delightful. Simple, useful, delightful. Typically people try to cram all their ideas into one. So simple, they make it really complicated. Make it something that people will love, people will use. What people are shocked to hear, that something like Facebook never advertised on TV. Something like Google never advertised on TV till many, many years later. How can we learn that for our own products? If I've got a startup, don't worry about where I'm advertising. Get it to work. That's my advice.
And then the success will follow. We need to go in for another short commercial break, and we'll be right back with more tips on social media from Sri Srinivasan. Welcome back. This is Biz1st in Focus. Tonight with me is social media guru Sri Srinivasan. Now, we heard about an incident related to a data breach, or rather sharing data with regard to Cambridge Analytica. Now, was it surprising that data that we submit to social media platforms is being used for purposes like this?
I don't think it's a surprise at all. Why should anybody be surprised? First of all, nobody ever reads the terms of service. They all say, I agree, without reading it. And so that's the first thing. Second is, anytime, and this is not my idea, but if you do not pay for something, you know, so the way the famous way to say it is that if you do not pay for a product, you are the product. Meaning that somebody's going to monetize the money. Somehow Facebook is making billions of dollars. It's not by in any other way except using your data. So your data is being used. So be smarter about it and use the tools that even Facebook gives you great tools to protect your privacy. But people are lazy and they don't do it. So take the time, and then you cannot blame anybody but yourself.
If you were Zuckerberg's best advisor, what would you say to revive the company or save the company from the sort of bad press that it's getting right now?
Yeah, I think some of what has happened to Facebook is self-inflicted. When there are crises, and this is not just for Facebook, any company, anytime you face there are questions about what you're doing, and what you're doing happens to be the most important, most widely watched thing in the world that week, do not retreat. Speak out, be honest, be open. I think Mark Zuckerberg, who I have met and who I know a little bit, is a very charismatic, interesting, smart person who wouldn't have built this empire without it. But there are advisors all around him who may have told him, let's be quiet, let's not talk, let's not do anything. I think he's been very good about being, you know, mea culpa, this is on me. We have to remember that all of this, when it started now more than a decade ago, was about rating girls and their looks in a college. You know, that's where it started, and where it has gone, no one could have predicted. And so I think that his job is to keep speaking, not just now because the US government is pulling you in, or the European government is pulling you, I don't know, Sri Lanka might say, you come and talk here also, but instead, let's say that you're Facebook, you have an obligation. 2 billion people love your product. They use your product every day. That is the biggest sign of it. Now, what are you doing to help them? And there's a lot of frustration about this. And so help them, and don't surprise them with these things.
Now, with this Cambridge Analytica story breaking, we saw a trend developing called delete Facebook. We saw several big names. We saw even Elon Musk pulling out his Facebook pages of Tesla as well as SpaceX. Do you think that this will gather momentum further, or do you think it will die down?
I think that there's already been some amount of kind of Facebook fatigue. A lot of young people say, I'm not going to use Facebook. And what I tell them is that, yes, you may not use Facebook today, but you're going to go to college, you're going to graduate, you're going to become alumni. Your college you want to be in touch with your college. You'll become a parent, you'll want to share pictures of your baby. There is a delete Facebook moment. I tell people, don't delete, because us running away from the problem is not going to solve this. We should hold these companies accountable. We should be there helping them and helping them think about this. And I remember in 2010 there was World Boycott Facebook Day, and 50,000 people announced they would delete Facebook by doing what? Of course, on a Facebook group, they announced that they will do this. And I kept saying, 50,000 people sounds like a lot, but that's nothing. In those days, there were 150,000 people joining every day on Facebook. So Facebook is going to survive this, because there's no other network that is as connected in all our lives. And by the way, he also owns Instagram, he also owns WhatsApp. And so he has built this ecosystem that is very strong and very important. Let's make it better. He should be more open to us, and we should be more open to him, to saying, let's make a difference. This is too valuable a network to be used by trolls and everything else. They shouldn't dominate. They shouldn't drive us away. But I'll also say that I believe nobody understands social media properly. Not me, certainly, and not any of these famous people who, even Elon Musk, he's a great man who's done a lot of things, but he doesn't understand social media. But you are just giving into your emotion and pulling out these things. You're as bad as anybody else. Instead, let's think about how we can do this. If they knew Facebook, if Facebook understood its own power, there would be no trolls, no Russian bots, no fake news. There would be, in fact, no President Donald J. Trump. He's a direct result of the lack of understanding by social media of its own purpose, its own power, and its own responsibility.
Now, social media, and key among them Facebook and Twitter, they'll be used as an avenue to express the opinions of people, the general public. We saw things like what happened in Egypt happening with the influence of social media. Do you think that with the advent of trolls and Russian hackers and bots and claims that there were tampering with the elections even in the United States, do you think that regulation should be considered?
Yeah, I think people are considering them. A lot of governments, especially Europe, is much more focused on this than in America. And in a way, you heard even Zuckerberg saying that we want to be controlled a little bit, we are open to ideas. I don't think government should be in the business of controlling this, because we have seen historically when governments start regulating things, they don't always regulate for the people, they regulate for their own purposes. So you're going from the market deciding things to the government deciding things, and that's not a good idea. I think that the best way is if the best people who are working at Facebook and all these social media companies say, let's be more honest, more open, more we're willing to listen to ideas. You're seeing now Zuckerberg is posting very often on his account and being just very direct, and I think that's a great thing. But not just him, it needs to happen with Twitter, it needs to happen with Instagram. All of these tools should speak out. We know so little about WhatsApp. How does it work? What does it do? But people swear by it. You may know this, that every morning millions of Indians wake up and they put good morning on WhatsApp for no reason, and it clogs the main internet servers of the world, slowed down by all these WhatsApp messages. So why can't we use it for better things than just wishing each other good morning or sharing fake health news? Is a big problem in South Asia. All the fake cancer cures and all of this stuff. People love to share. Why can't we do better? That's not the fault of Facebook that we do that. That's us.
Now, let's get on to a much more lighter note, because we are in the final few minutes of the show. What is your favorite social media platform? What do you use the most?
Well, what I use the most is Twitter, but I love Facebook and I love Instagram because I think that they can do a lot of good in the world. I'll just say at a time when everyone's starting to delete Facebook, I had two friends who lost their fathers, and they posted on Facebook, and it wasn't just random people just hitting like or sad face. People were posting stories about these men. They said, oh, I remember, I'm your cousin who you have not met, but 45 years ago he helped me, like that kind of love and connection you will not get on any other way except on a social network, and especially on Facebook. And I'm a more upbeat person about all of this stuff, and I believe we'll get past this, partly because I also say this too shall pass, something worse will come. So we might look back and laugh, a year from now if we talk to say, oh, those Cambridge Analytica days were so nice, because something much worse has happened since then.
Okay, last question. What is the best tip that you can give to our viewers with regard to using social media?
Wow, that's a lot. I make a living giving lots of tips. So if I had to pick one thing, I would say that what's common sense in real life is common sense in social media. Meaning there's no special magic formula or anything. Just be yourself. Be whatever mother taught you about how to behave online, not about online. Your mother taught you about how to behave in life is also what you should do online. If you think about, like, maybe do all the opposite of whatever the President of the United States is doing. Like, he's doing all the things that I'm sure even his mother said: be nice to people, be honest. All of these things he's doing the opposite, and maybe you should do the opposite of that, and then you'll be successful.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join our show, Mr. Srinivasan. That's it from Biz1st in Focus for tonight. I'm Rameshwar Galbandara. Good night.